I'm Joy Morris, inviting you to listen to true stories of the Wild West, hosted by C.R. King, a production of RK Enterprises.
Hello, everybody. C.R. King here. Today we are going to talk about Samuel Clemens. It was in the early part of the Civil War. A division was formed, volunteers from his state, and he was elected to be the officer and lead that division. Before they ever went to war, before they ever got into any type of scrape with the Union Army, he fell off his horse, severely injured his ankle, and could not ride very well. So the volunteers left him with these 3 women, and they took off. As he was healing, bedridden, the Union Army came in. They searched the house. They didn't find him. He was hiding under the bed. They left. All was good. He healed. He shed himself of his uniform. He rode back home. He basically quit the Confederate Army. His brother Orion, that's his name, Orion, owned a newspaper, and he was involved in Lincoln's election. Well, they formed a new territory called Nevada, and Orion was appointed to be the secretary of the Nevada Territory. There's only 2 men appointed, Orion and James Nye, spelled N-Y-E, who was to be governor. Their job was to put together a government, a constitution, and voting apparatus so that they could easily slide into and become a state. Orion decided to protect his brother, Sam, and wanted to take him to Carson City, Nevada. The Lincoln administration fought him on that because they knew he was a Confederate, but finally they gave in. So, 1881, they left St. Joe, Missouri, for Carson City, Nevada. The price for this 1,900-mile trip was $150 each. The requirements in the luggage was 1 valise, 25 pounds maximum per person. Most of their clothes had to be left behind, except for the bare essentials in a pile left behind, except with a sign on it, free. Sam brought his coveted unabridged dictionary. That weighed 6 pounds. Orion brought 4 pounds worth of United States statutes, laws. Orion, again appointed as Secretary of the Nevada Territory, had to have those statutes so he could help guide the territory at the statehood. Orion's salary was $1,800, and his brother Sam was going to be his secretary. They took the overland stage, and the stage ride normally would take between 15 to 20 days. Theirs would be a 19-day trip, plus a 2.5-day in Salt Lake City. Overall, they averaged 4.9 miles per hour, often much faster at 10 miles per hour. All depended on weather conditions, the rivers, the streams, the levels that had to be traveled or traversed, the mountains, and in this case, the Rockies and the deserts, not to mention breakdowns. By the way, the Pony Express rider rode 50 miles per day. The same trip for them was 8 days. They drove or rode 24 hours a day with 2 stops, one for breakfast and one for dinner at the way stations. And every time they stopped, they changed their teams, and they would stop quite a few times in between those 2 stops. They had to change the teams, and they had the buildings, the way stations in line to take care of them. But like I said, the ride was 19 days, 24 hours a day, plus 2.5 days at Salt Lake City. We'll get there. On the way, they ran into all types of things. Bodily remains, Indians following them, potential danger with outlaws. They ran into, in Julesburg, Colorado, they ran into Jack Slade, then considered the most dangerous man in the West. And yes, he was a killer. They went on, and the next thing, big stop, was at Salt Lake City. They were trapped there. The Mormons were angry because Nevada was cut out of their territory. They did not trust non-Mormons. It was a dangerous place to be. They had to deal with the leader of the Mormon church. And they had to do it his way. They had to be very cautious. They couldn't talk to any women without being spoken to first. The protocol was very, very strict. Everybody listened to this guy. And you all know who he was. So they knew that Orion was the secretary of the new territory. And they were trying to find out what was going on and what they could do to get back their territory, which was really never anything they could do. After a couple of days, they made it all the way to Carson City. Governor Nye was waiting for them. When they checked into their little hotel, if you will, they were guided by a man on horseback to Governor Nye's house. He had just arrived himself. Along the way, that man on that horse found another man on the main street. They had a problem. He went over there, and they immediately drew guns, and they had to shoot out. They both lived, but their guide was severely injured, and they were in total shock. They get to the mansion. Orion finds out that under no circumstances is Sam allowed to work for the government. He was a Confederate. That's his problem. So now Sam is there. He has no job. Orion had to take care of him. He lived in that little shack of a hotel. Then he just basically hanged out around town. Now let me tell you about Carson City back in 1861. Carson City was rich in gold, silver, copper, lead, coal, iron, quicksilver, marble, granite, chalk, plaster of Paris, thieves, murderers, desperados, ladies, children, lawyers, Christians, Indians, Chinamen, Spaniards, gamblers, sharpers, coyotes, poets, preachers, and jackass rabbits. There was indeed a shooting, a stabbing, or a mugging every day in Carson City. Well, Sam was out trying to get jobs, and he was terrible at jobs, and he usually left after a day. He tried to find gold and silver. He was bad at that. The federal government needed all that stuff to help support the war. That's why they brought those two guys in. One, Brigham Young, the head of the Mormon Church. Brigham Young was the head of the Mormon Church, and he had 55 wives. Unbelievable. So, Sam could not find work. He tried to find gold. He actually caught Lake Bigler on fire. Yes, Lake Bigler. Today, it's known as Lake Tahoe. He started a fire by mistake. He was fined big time for that, a full $25. Okay. So, finally, looking for gold, it was cold and wintry. They were in a tent, him and his partners. They were at Aurora, Nevada. And he started writing letters to the editor. And they got published. And Dan DeQuill, the head editor, who would become Sam's mentor, offered him a job at his newspaper. So he went back to Carson and he started writing. And he was very controversial. And one day he was too controversial. He wrote about the very wealthy women that were putting on a fundraiser for the Civil War, and he blasted them. Actually, it would soon become known as the Red Cross, or in a sense, it was actually for what would become hospitals and nurses. At any rate, he blasted them, saying that they were keeping the money for themselves, and that pissed a lot of people off, and suddenly everybody was after him. They wanted to kill him, and they wanted to fight a duel with him. And Sandy Quill came to him and said, I cannot protect you. This newspaper cannot protect you. No, you have to leave, and leave now. And he did. He went to California. He stayed there for a while. Actually, his whole time in the far west was 7 years. He only meant to be there for 7 months, but he stayed 7 years. He wrote a story, got it published, The Leaping Frogs of Calaveras County. The man, when he was in newspaper, writing newspaper articles, editorials, was told to change his name. And he did. And he used that name when he went back home to the East Coast. His name, Mark Twain. Probably the greatest writer we've ever had in this country. And that says a lot. Okay, I want to let you go here at 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Okay? I forget the name of the women reporter, what they were doing, but it would soon become known as the Red Cross many years later. Many years later, the Red Cross. There's more to the story, but you would have to read about them elsewhere. Or contact me and I'll supply you with an article, a bigger article, for a fee. $5 plus postage. Okay? Or no postage if we send it to you through emails. Okay, everybody. C.R. King here. I'm signing off. Thank you. Take care.
True Stories of the Old West.